What if a country's very identity was so violently contested that its future was being written in blood and rewritten in rubble every single day? Imagine a land at the crossroads of ancient history and modern catastrophe. A place whose name conjures images of chaos, yet whose story is one of the most profoundly human and misunderstood on Earth. This isn't a journey to a tourist destination. It is an expedition into the heart of a paradox, an attempt to understand why a nation so rich in culture and resources has become the site of the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Together, we will peel back the layers of headlines and statistics to find the tangled roots of pride, conflict, and breathtaking resilience. This is the story of Yemen. Life in Yemen feels like being trapped in a nightmare that never ends. This is not a poetic flourish, it is the daily, grinding reality for millions. War is not a distant event on the news, it is the very air people breathe, the toxic atmosphere that shapes every mundane decision, every hushed conversation, every desperate prayer. It is the sound of a jet engine screaming overhead, a sound that doesn't just signify travel, but potential annihilation. Families live in a state of perpetual, nerve-shredding alert, their bodies instinctively tensing, bracing for the shuddering explosion that will inevitably come. The one that shatters windows, sending shards of glass flying like shrapnel through a living room. The one that shakes the very foundations of their homes. In those terrifying moments, mothers hold their children tight, a futile physical shield against industrial-grade explosives. They whisper reassurances they themselves don't believe as walls around them crack and dust fills the air. The question that hangs in the darkness of every night is not if the bombs will fall, but where and whether they will see the morning sun. The psychological trauma of this existence is a deep, septic wound that never closes. The United Nations has called it a crisis of peak proportions, where over 4 million people have been forced from their homes, becoming refugees in their own country. The trauma manifests in children who have forgotten how to play, whose drawings are filled not with houses and suns, but with warplanes and explosions. Even the youngest, too little to grasp the geopolitics of their suffering, cry uncontrollably. They don't understand the why, but their small bodies have learned the language of terror. Hunger is the silent, stalking partner to the bombs. It's a cruel, slow-motion catastrophe where parents, their own bodies wasting away, watch helplessly as their children grow thinner. They witness the light in their children's eyes dim, their playful energy replaced by a lethargic listlessness. This is the face of severe acute malnutrition, a condition threatening millions of Yemeni children. It's a daily, desperate calculus of rationing tiny scraps of food to keep starvation at bay. The lines for food aid, when it arrives, stretch for hours under a punishing sun. But these lines are lotteries of survival. For many, the journey ends with empty hands and a heart made heavier by the certainty that there will be nothing to eat tonight. In Yemen, hunger kills as surely and as brutally as any explosive, but its work is slow, intimate, and agonizing. Clean water, the most basic element of life, is a rare luxury, a memory from a forgotten time of peace. The war has decimated infrastructure, forcing people to drink from contaminated wells and stagnant pools. It is a life, or death gamble, a choice between the immediate agony of thirst and the high probability of contracting cholera or other deadly waterborne diseases. Yemen has suffered one of the worst cholera outbreaks in modern history, a direct consequence of this broken system. And the final safety net for a society, the healthcare system, has utterly collapsed. Hospitals, if they haven't been bombed, are museums of despair, not places of healing. They are overflowing with the wounded and the sick, but doctors, their faces etched with the trauma of what they have seen, are soldiers without weapons. They have no medicine, no anesthesia, no sterile bandages, no reliable electricity to run vital equipment. Imagine being a parent who has carried their sick child for miles, only to arrive and find a doctor who can offer nothing but a look of profound sorrow. This is where the hope of a nation goes to die. In a crowded hospital hallway, where the sheer scale of suffering has overwhelmed the human capacity to help. When people think of the Arabian Peninsula, a powerful and consistent set of images comes to mind: the Sacred Heart of Islam in Mecca and Medina, the vast, seemingly infinite reserves of oil, and the dazzling, futuristic skylines of Dubai, Doha, or Riyadh. It's a perception of immense wealth, of stable, if authoritarian, monarchies that have leveraged their resources to create islands of hyper-modernity. The unspoken assumption is that this prosperity is a regional characteristic, but that assumption shatters violently at the peninsula's southern tip. Here lies Yemen. Crossing the border from Saudi Arabia into Yemen, even before the war, was like stepping into a different century, a different universe. While its neighbor is defined by meticulous central planning and unimaginable luxury, Yemen's identity is shaped by conflict, poverty, and a beautiful, rugged chaos. How is this possible? How can two Muslim countries, sharing a border over 700 kilometers long, born from the same desert sands, and steeped in the same ancient traditions, have such profoundly different fates? The paradox deepens when you look beneath the soil. Like Libya or its fabulously wealthy Gulf neighbors, Yemen is an oil-rich land. It possesses significant reserves of oil and natural gas that should, in a rational world, fund development, education, and prosperity. It also boasts one of the most strategic coastlines in the world, overlooking the vital Bab el-Mandeb Strait, a choke point for global shipping, and its natural beauty is staggering. From the otherworldly landscapes of Socotra Island, the Galapagos of the Indian Ocean, to the ancient, mud-brick skyscrapers of Shibam, the world's first vertical city. Tourism alone could have built a thriving, sustainable economy. But in Yemen, these resources have become a curse, not a blessing. The potential wealth has only served to fuel greed and conflict. The oil has become a prize to be fought over by warring factions, with control of pipelines and refineries meaning control of power. The strategic location has made it a chessboard for regional powers. Today, international flights are rare. Tourists, understandably, stay away. And in a tragic, damning indictment of this failure, over 80% of the population, in a land of oil fields and stunning coastlines, now relies on international aid just to survive. To understand this tragic paradox, we must look beyond the present-day suffering and dig into the deep, historical fractures that made Yemen so vulnerable. Yemen's story of division is not new. It is etched into its mountains and deserts. For centuries, it was a remote, loosely governed corner of the Ottoman Empire. In the mountainous north, a unique form of Shia Islam known as Zaydism held sway, led by a line of rulers called imams who had ruled for over 1,000 years. This created a distinct cultural and religious identity in the highlands. As the Ottoman Empire weakened in the 19th century, another power arrived: the British. They seized the strategic port of Aden in the south, transforming it into a bustling crown colony and a vital refueling station on the sea route to India. After World War I, the Ottoman Empire collapsed, and Yemen was officially severed from its rule. But independence did not bring unity. Instead, it solidified a division that would haunt the nation for the next century. For most of the 20th century, Yemen was not one country, but two. In the north, the ancient Zaydi Imamate was eventually overthrown in a bloody civil war in the 1960s, leading to the creation of the Yemen Arab Republic, or North Yemen. It was a deeply conservative, tribal society, largely isolated from the world and backed by Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, in the south, the British were eventually driven out, and a very different state emerged, the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen, or South Yemen. It became the only Marxist state in the Arab world, fiercely secular and heavily backed by the Soviet Union. Here, society was radically restructured. Women were granted more rights than anywhere else on the peninsula, and the state pushed massive literacy campaigns. But it was also a repressive, one-party state. For decades, these two Yemens, the conservative, tribal North and the socialist, secular South, existed as separate nations with opposing ideologies, occasionally clashing in border wars. Their cultures, their political systems, their entire worldviews were starkly different. In 1990, with the end of the Cold War and the collapse of its Soviet patron, South Yemen was economically crippled and politically isolated. A hasty unification with the North seemed like the only option. The Republic of Yemen was born, but it was a deeply unequal partnership. The North, with its significantly larger population, quickly dominated the new state's politics, military, and economy. Southerners felt their distinct identity, and resources were being swallowed by the North. Their secular laws were rolled back, their leaders were sidelined, and their oil wealth was, in their eyes, plundered. This simmering resentment boiled over into a brief, but bitter civil war in 1994, where the Northern Army, led by President Ali Abdullah Saleh, crushed the South's attempt to secede. The war was won, but the peace was lost. The wound of 1994 never healed. Unification had papered over deep cracks of history, culture, and ideology. It created a single state on the map, but it failed to create a single, unified people. This legacy of division, this living grievance, is the fertile ground in which the current catastrophe has grown. The fragile, resentful peace was held together for over 3 decades by the cunning and ruthless grip of one man, President Ali Abdullah Saleh. A master of patronage and political maneuvering, Saleh famously described ruling Yemen as dancing on the heads of snakes, skillfully playing different tribes, political parties, and regional powers against each other to maintain his own power. But his regime was built on a foundation of systemic corruption and deepening inequality. In 2011, the winds of the Arab Spring, which had toppled dictators in Tunisia and Egypt, swept into Yemen. Hundreds of thousands of protesters, from all walks of life, filled the streets of Sanaa and other cities. They weren't just demanding democracy, they were demanding an end to the corruption, the staggering unemployment, and Saleh's long, suffocating rule. Under immense international and domestic pressure, Saleh eventually stepped down in a deal brokered by the Gulf states, handing power to his vice president, Abdrabbuh Mansur Hadi. But this was not a clean transition to a new era. It was the opening of a Pandora's box. Saleh's removal did not solve Yemen's problems. It simply removed the strongmen who had kept the lid on the country's boiling frustrations. It created a massive power vacuum, and various factions, long suppressed or manipulated by Saleh, saw their chance. The most organized and powerful of these was a movement from the country's mountainous north known as the Houthis, officially called Ansar Allah, or Partisans of God. The Houthis, hailing from the Zaydi Shia heartland, had fought several rebellions against Saleh's government in the 2000s, feeling their community was being religiously persecuted and economically marginalized. Now, tapping into widespread public anger over the new government's perceived weakness and continued corruption, they presented themselves as populist champions against the old guard. In a stunning and ironic twist, the Houthis formed a tactical alliance with their former arch nemesis, ex-President Saleh, who still commanded the loyalty of elite military units. This unholy alliance proved unstoppable. In late 2014, Houthi fighters, bolstered by Saleh's forces, swept down from their northern strongholds and seized control of the capital, Sanaa, forcing President Hadi and his government to flee south to Aden. For the Houthis, this was the culmination of a popular revolution. For President Hadi's government and its international backers, it was an illegal coup d'état. The country was now split wide open, with two rival centers of power. A domestic power struggle had begun, but it was about to be transformed into something far larger, far more complex, and infinitely more destructive. What turned a domestic power struggle into the world's worst humanitarian crisis? The answer lies beyond Yemen's borders, in the cold, hard geopolitics of the Middle East. The conflict became a proxy war, a battle for regional dominance fought on Yemeni soil between two arch rivals, the Sunni Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the Shia Republic of Iran. When the Houthis took Sanaa, the royal court in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia's capital, looked south and saw an existential threat. They viewed the Houthis not as a homegrown Yemeni movement with legitimate grievances, but as a direct proxy of their primary adversary, Iran. The terrifying prospect of an Iran-aligned, heavily armed militia, a Hezbollah on the Arabian Peninsula, controlling a large territory and a strategic coastline right on their southern border was, for the Saudi monarchy, an unacceptable red line. In March 2015, Saudi Arabia, along with the United Arab Emirates and a coalition of other Sunni Arab states, launched Operation Decisive Storm, a massive air campaign designed to crush the Houthis and restore the internationally recognized government of President Hadi. They were armed with the most advanced weaponry money could buy, and they expected a quick, decisive victory. They were catastrophically wrong. Iran, for its part, saw the conflict as a golden opportunity. By providing asymmetric support, technical expertise, weapons, and critically, sophisticated ballistic missile and drone technology, to the Houthis, they could bog down their richer, more powerful rival in a costly and unwinnable war, all at a relatively low cost to themselves. It was a classic proxy war strategy: bleed your enemy by arming their enemy. The chessboard became even more crowded. The UAE, while a key coalition partner, pursued its own agenda, focusing on securing southern ports and backing the resurgent Southern Secessionist movement, the Southern Transitional Council, STC, which also seeks to break away from the North. This meant that at times, the UAE's proxies were fighting against the very Hadi government forces they were supposedly there to support. And then there are the Western powers. The United States, the UK, and France, while not dropping bombs themselves, have been indispensable enablers of the Saudi-led campaign. They have sold tens of billions of dollars in aircraft, bombs, and missiles to the coalition. They have provided logistical support, mid-air refueling for jets on bombing runs, and crucial targeting intelligence. For years, they provided diplomatic cover at the United Nations, shielding the coalition from accountability for airstrikes that repeatedly hit markets, weddings, and hospitals. Yemen was no longer in a civil war. It had become the tragic stage for a brutal game of geopolitical chess, where the Yemeni people were the pawns, sacrificed for the ambitions of foreign powers. This high-level conflict casts a long, dark shadow over every aspect of daily life, creating a surreal and dangerous new normal. When you walk through the streets of Yemeni cities, the first thing you notice is the prevalence of weapons. A Kalashnikov slung over the shoulder is as common as a cell phone. This isn't necessarily a sign of aggression. It's a symptom of a completely collapsed state. When there is no police force you can trust, no functioning judicial system, and checkpoints run by competing militias dot every road, a rifle becomes your only insurance policy. It's your only means of defending your family, your property, or intimidating a potential threat. In this landscape of desperation, one plant reigns supreme: cat. It's a leafy green shrub, and for Yemeni men, chewing it is a deeply ingrained cultural ritual that transcends social class. Afternoons are dedicated to it. Business deals are closed, political arguments are had, and friendships are reaffirmed during these long chewing sessions, which provide a mild sense of euphoria and relaxation. But cat is also a profound economic and environmental curse. Its cultivation consumes enormous amounts of Yemen's scarce water resources, up to 40% of it, displacing vital food crops. Men often spend a significant portion of their meager income on their daily bundle of leaves, and a nation's afternoon productivity grinds to a halt in a collective, narcotic haze. It is a feedback loop of culture and crisis. The formal economy is in ruins, replaced by a brutal war economy. The average monthly income, for those lucky enough to have one, hovers around an unlivable 100s. The Yemeni rial has lost so much value that it's practically worthless. A new class of war profiteers has emerged: smugglers, arms dealers, and militia leaders who grow rich by controlling checkpoints and taxing humanitarian aid. For ordinary people, this economic desperation forces impossible choices, where taking a bribe or engaging in illicit activities is no longer a moral failing, but a rational decision in the struggle for survival. In this deeply conservative, male-dominated society, the pressure on women is immense. Public life is almost exclusively a male domain. Yet, behind the black veils and the closed doors of homes, another story of incredible resilience unfolds. With so many men fighting at the front, detained, or killed, women have often become the silent pillars of their families and communities. They are the ones who manage the household on nothing, who walk for miles to find clean water, who lead small, local initiatives to feed their neighbors. They are the invisible heroes, the connective tissue holding the tattered fabric of society together. Perhaps the deepest and most unforgivable tragedy of all is the stolen future of Yemen's children. An entire generation is growing up in the shadow of this war. According to UNICEF, at least 2 million children are out of school. Classrooms have been bombed into ruins or are now used to shelter displaced families. For these children, education is a distant, almost mythical dream. Parents worry, with good reason, that their kids are growing up knowing nothing but the language of violence, their childhoods replaced by trauma and hunger. The world they know is one of armed men, displacement camps, and the constant, terrifying fear of the sky. This is a lost generation, and the long-term consequences for Yemen's future. A lack of skilled labor, the ease of recruitment into armed groups, are terrifying to contemplate. And yet, even in the deepest, most suffocating darkness, you find inexplicable flickers of light. Hope in Yemen is not a passive, abstract feeling, it is an active, defiant choice made every single day. It's in the artists who paint vibrant murals of peace and life on the gray, shrapnel-scarred walls of bombed-out buildings. It's in the dedicated teachers who, with no salary and no resources, gather children in makeshift tents to hold classes, determined to keep the flame of learning alive. It's in the incredible, unshakable hospitality of the people. A family that has lost everything and is living in a tattered tent will still invite a stranger in and share the little food and tea they have, a testament to a kindness and dignity that the war has not been able to extinguish. They still find joy in small, simple things. For a group of boys, a game of soccer on a dusty patch of ground, with rocks for goalposts, is a moment of pure, unadulterated freedom, a temporary escape from the nightmare. For a child, a small gift from a visitor, a pen, a piece of candy, can be the highlight of their year, a reminder that they are not forgotten by the outside world. This is the enduring spirit of the Yemeni people, a spirit that has been battered, bruised, and betrayed, but has steadfastly refused to be broken. The story of Yemen is a stark, harrowing reminder that a country is not just a place on a map. It is a complex, living tapestry of history, culture, and human lives. We began this journey looking at a nightmare, and we found that it was a nightmare with a clear, devastating architecture. Built from the foundations of historical divisions, fueled by the gasoline of regional rivalries, and paid for with the lives of millions of ordinary people. Yemen is a lesson, written in pain, of what happens when internal fractures are exploited by outside forces, and when a nation's people become disposable pawns in distant geopolitical games. It is more than a tragedy, it is a global warning. What part of Yemen's story or the forces shaping it surprised you the most? Share your thoughts or your questions in the comments below. We read all of them. If this journey has offered you a new perspective, please share this video with a friend who also seeks to understand the world beyond the headlines. Subscribe for more deep dives into the world's most fascinating and misunderstood places. And if you're curious about another nation grappling with its complex past and a powerful neighbor, check out our video on the story of Armenia.